Hello, everyone, and welcome to our training series, How to Use AI Strategically for Your Content Strategy. In part one, we focused on the evolution of content in search and how AI factors into things and best practices to help elevate your content strategy. You'll receive a copy of that recording if you haven't already in today's follow-up, but today we're going to focus on content prioritization and planning. I'm Elizabeth Irvin, the VP of Marketing and Customer Success for MarketMuse, and I'll be shepherding you through this three-part series. But more importantly, your speakers today are Steve and Jeske from MarketMuse, a platform that helps you prioritize content opportunities based on authority and personalized difficulty to rank. Stephen has been doing content strategy for a long time and knows what it takes to make great content strategies by hand and with the help of AI. Stephen is joined by Annie Madden and Lauren McBetty from Silverback Strategies, a performance marketing agency that helps their clients stay ahead of the ever-changing landscape. Annie helps Silverback clients deliver best-in-class content strategies, and Lauren helps them understand what's working and not in order to stay competitive in the market. I'm excited for what they'll share today. They're going to start off by talking about how the search landscape has changed, but not the goal of why you're publishing content hasn't changed. It's more important now than ever to be strategic and purposeful about your content choices. They'll review some real-world content planning examples as well. Feel free to ask questions throughout in the Q&A box in the bottom of Zoom. If they're not answered live, we'll answer them at the end. All right, Lauren, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. So to level set for today, really wanted to start the conversation by kind of acknowledging the uncertainty of the content space right now. We know that there has been a lot of change over the last, year and a half or so. ChatGPT introduced late 2022, really riled things up. And then we saw another big change again in just a couple months ago with the March core algorithm update, which we discussed briefly in our last session. For those of you who weren't here, again, spoke about how primarily that update was about cleaning up low quality, spammy content from the SERPs. And so really a lot of AI produced content was targeted with the rollout of that update. And so that was a big change in just, again, the last couple of weeks. And now last week, May 14th, we get the announcement from Google that they're going to roll out AI overviews, formerly known as SGE. And so I'm sure this is very much top of mind for you all, but just to provide a little bit of additional information for those who maybe don't have as much context as to what this update is. AI overviews is Google's new search feature that uses generative AI, and it provides users with much more concise, consolidated answers to like a complex or like a longer tail query. And so it does this by basically synthesizing all indexed content relevant to the query and providing a snapshot, a summary of the answer for the user. So it's the most direct to the point without them having to click through to different sites to obtain the answer themselves. And so that's a big change for content strategy. And this is a very new update. So obviously we don't know the true impact yet, short and long term, but just off of the bat, what we're starting to see is that, those longer tail queries where you're more likely to see the generative AI pop up in search. And so that really calls into question the value of upper and mid funnel content and if the investment is worth it to pursue those strategies. And I'm sure we're going to talk about it in a minute, but there's a lot of pressure coming down from leadership as to, why you might want to pursue that or not pursue that. And so generally the kind of infiltration of AI in search results and really the changing definition of search in this new AI landscape is it's shifting how we identify and prioritize content opportunities that make the most sense for our business. And more than ever, it's really important that we're able to filter out what actual meaningful opportunities are from all of these kind of shiny balls. There's so many topic paths you could pursue. How are we finding the ones that are going to be most impactful to your business? Because at this point, the stakes are very high, right? For SEOs and content marketers, we're really feeling the heat right now. And when it comes to selecting the wrong content focus, that can have pretty serious consequences. From a personal perspective, there's, the pressure from leadership to continue doing more with less. We've already been asked over this last year to do more with less. AI overviews now kind of calling into question again, maybe what is the value of that upper funnel investment? We're going to start to see potentially budgets reduced. That risk is definitely on the horizon, especially if we're not able to adequately thread the needle for leadership and prove out the value of that investment and prove out ROI, which has always been a challenge for content. And now more so than ever, it's going to be really important. On top of that, there's also, risk of layoffs, of reduction of resources. We've definitely heard anecdotes over the last year of teams being cut down significantly to, from 5, 10, 15 people to just, 1 or 2 resources now that are relied upon to drive content production and strategy and impact for an entire organization. And so that's a lot of pressure on those individuals. And then in addition to those kind of direct consequences that we're seeing as content marketers, there's also more long-term impact in terms of just being able to run a successful content program and drive business results, right? First, if we are pulling investment or reducing investment in these kind of upper mid-funnel strategies, that more educational content, that nurturing content, and we're only focusing bottom funnel, we're not going to be able to see sustained growth over time the way that we do with a full funnel strategy. And that's really because bottom funnel is geared towards capturing existing demand, but it doesn't really help you grow an audience and expand that pool of prospects the way that educational content does at the upper funnel. And so if we're only capturing existing and we're not generating new demand over time, we're really going to see that performance plateau and then potentially even see some diminishing returns there. So in terms of just the impact to business results longer term could be detrimental. And then lastly, another consideration that we've been discussing with our clients is these search updates are so new. AI overviews, again, 1 week ago announced. So even with all of the testing that has been done in beta, the AI is still learning. Google is going to continue to optimize. We're really in these early days where there's a real opportunity to kind of train and teach the AI what good looks like. And so again, AI overviews is generative AI that's scraping from sources already available. It's not creating any new information. So if we're continuing to invest in building that high quality, helpful educational content, that's then is what the AI is going to use and deem valuable, deem accurate to be able to serve a result to a user. If we're not investing in creating content that addresses those queries, then we're really missing the opportunity to train AI what good looks like for your particular industry or line of business. And so with all that in mind, before we move into the more, positive component of the presentation, we did want to just take a moment to check in with all of you and ask how maybe all of you have been seeing this play out. So Elizabeth, I'll let you take point on the poll.
Yes, I just launched the poll. You teed it up perfectly, so I don't even need to. I'll give a minute or so. Oh, it's like going all over the place. There's one leader and then it switches. So that's really interesting. It looks like the prevailing leader, maybe investment has stayed the same, but consistency is the focus. And then the next one, choosing new forms of content, but working within the same intention. But let's see. Thanks everybody for going through and filling out. Right. Oh, it's still shifting. I love live polling. What do you guys think? Any initial thoughts? Looks like our investment has stayed the same, about a little over half of the responses for that one, and then about 30% pivoting to new forms of content, but working with the same attention and buy-in. What are your initial reactions?
I mean, my reaction is that that's really good. I mean, that's what we're recommending for our clients. There's so much variability right now that to make any aggressive change off the bat, like we don't have any like data to inform any like drastic decisions. So we're kind of curious if we stay the course, at least over the immediate short term, what are the impacts going to be if we, reduce as many changing variables as possible and get learnings from that, and then figure out how we can experiment and test into new opportunities given the way that the landscape is shaking out. So That's great to hear.
Looks like there are some people who've had an increase in investment, which is awesome. And for those whose budget has been slashed, as it's phrased there, we have the next session that we're talking about is in terms of measurement and demonstrating that ROI. So come to the next one, and maybe there's something that can help there, but we definitely feel you. Any other reactions to the poll, Annie or Stephen?
No, I think Lauren said it really well. I think it is something that we're recommending, is trying to keep consistency as much as possible while everything is new. It can be very easy to want to like get ahead and react and do all these things, but with stuff like this, it's so new, and like we really don't know necessarily what is like the key that makes everything work. There's a lot of experimentation, and so that takes budget, that takes resources to test everything and make sure everything's working for you specifically, as opposed to just someone else. So
Yeah,
happy to hear it, guys.
Her words have never been spoken. You know what drives me nuts is all the fear mongering I see on social media about this. And it is so wrong. I understand that gets attention, but if you're just thinking about this rationally, strategically speaking, it just making drastic changes at this point in time. You know what? I mean, you're just throwing spaghetti against the wall. Maybe you'll get lucky. And of course, if you do, those are the types of things you're going to read about on social media, but you're not going to hear about the ones that went wrong. So the best course of action right now is not to panic and just stick with what's happening and gather your data before you make any, major decisions.
And you'll just have a messy wall to clean up. So something else to consider. Okay. Annie.
Awesome.
on to
Yeah.
you.
So, love to hear that a lot of your guys' budgets are staying the same, that you have the ability to kind of experiment and kind of learn how to navigate some of these things going forward. Because there are so many things that you could do with AI. It can be extremely overwhelming. Like Stephen was saying, you see lots of headlines and you see lots of different unique use cases. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. But, just because someone or something worked for someone else doesn't mean it's, inherently going to work for you. And, if Jurassic Park has taught us anything, it's just because you can doesn't mean you should. We're not trying to be magpies collecting all these shiny balls and calling it treasure. We want to make sure that we're strategic with the choices that we're making for all the reasons that Lauren had alluded to earlier. So the question becomes then, how do you take all of this change, all the opportunities, all the things you could do, and distill it down into, an action plan, the roadmap that leadership is asking for, the next steps clients wants to see, how do you filter out those shiny balls from the things that are actually going to show performance and results? And kind of to what Stephen was alluding to, kind of hate to say it a little bit, but you do that by taking the time to do research and to collect data and do your due diligence. The good news though is with that, you start by essentially doing what you've always done. The good news is that while a lot has changed, there are a lot of distractions going around. The core process of creating a strong content and SEO strategy itself remains intact. It remains pretty much the same. Doing a content strategy, even in the AI world, still involves the rough stages of goal setting, doing your research, doing an audit of all your various things, your stuff, and compiling all that into a strategy. It's just that the aspects of executing those steps, what you're looking for within those steps, that might be changing based on new technologies, new opportunities, new lenses that are required. And as we talked about in the previous webinar, AI doesn't replace your process. It speeds up your process. It doesn't cut out steps, lets you kind of do more within various steps within the process. So that means you have more opportunities to test all these new opportunities, to get that data and see what actually works for you. We won't walk through each of these steps as you're likely familiar with them. They're, like I said, the rough steps of doing a content strategy. But we did want to just point out a couple of the different things kind of within each of these steps that have changed kind of given the new kind of considerations that, AI has forced us to take. So with goal setting, kind of like Lauren was alluding to and spoke about, one of the big shifts is this kind of growing fear of upper funnel content. So it's important to make sure everyone is on the same page about whether you want to prioritize generating versus capturing demand, how you want to balance that, and what your teams, your departments, your businesses' priorities are. With AI overviews and just generally the inherent ROI tracking issues, that exist with top of funnel content, many marketing departments, are not willing to continue with that kind of uncertainty with upper funnel content and want to opt instead more for that kind of what feels more reliable bottom funnel content. But like Lauren said, that'll if you go too far down that rabbit hole, it'll just dry up your funnel. If you want to be there when customers are ready to buy, you need to be there when they're ready to learn. It's a relationship, it's a friendship. You can't ask your friend to help you move if you don't hang out with them on Friday nights. You can't marry someone if you don't go on first dates. You kind of have to still put yourself out there. All that normal classic marketing philosophy still applies. It gets harder in this kind of new situation we find ourselves in, and may require a pivot in your strategy as what's been successful might be changing, but it's still that same level of importance. You still need to keep your goals aligned with what Google or any search engine's goals are when it comes to providing, quality content to people who are looking for it, wherever, whenever they're looking for it. Brands that are as comprehensive and supportive of users as possible they're going to be the ones favored by Google. Looking at research, things like AI overviews will probably start impacting that purely informational kind of topics that a lot of the time drove a lot of traffic at the top of funnel, or even whatever the space is prior to the top of the funnel. In the past, that might start to lose value a little bit. So, one of the key things is figuring out where you need to pivot beyond that, to find these new full funnel topics, finding those interests, finding those pain points, those drivers to purchase that really speak to your audience, that differentiates you from your competitors, that either don't have AI overviews showing up or that do, and you want to make sure that you're optimizing that content in a way that, makes you pulled in as one of the sources. And, kind of alluded to, all of that takes time and research to figure out. It's probably not something that, you can just task a marketing intern to do for a quick turnaround. You're going to have to understand exactly what your audience is looking for and exactly how your organization, like what you offer, fits in with what they're looking for. You'll be looking at audience research, competitor research, how AI overviews are showing up in the SERP, the normal fluctuations that show up, in the SERPs, all these different things. Is your audience searching on web pages, or are they searching on other channels, other platforms? The good thing is that this is exactly where AI can help you, this kind of aspect, this research mode. Depending on the task at hand, you can use it to expedite your research and pull new insights that would have taken like way too long, way too manual effort to pull before. So for example, one of the things that we've done is you can export like your products reviews, feed them to ChatGPT, ask it to summarize the main pain points of negative reviews, the main selling points of positive ones, any common themes, that show up. And it can then summarize audience and customer sentiment for you in minutes. That's something that would have taken hours and hours of kind of manual time to read and synthesize and do otherwise. So, what AI tools will be helpful for you vary based on, what you're trying to do, the task at hand, but speeding up all these different things you're researching, all the different elements there with AI, that's what AI is good for, kind of for our previous session. That's one of the areas that helps you kind of speed up so that you can do more and figure out what's helpful for you and what's not. It's a similar thing with auditing. Everyone's done a content audit. That's great. Not everyone has maybe considered that now you need to audit things kind of beyond just a website, maybe. You might need to start looking at YouTube, your YouTube channel or social. Kids these days like to use TikTok as a search engine. Like, is that your audience? Like, should you be on there? Given how displaced the user journey has become, how multi-channel it is, how kind of convoluted it can sometimes be, there's just so much more you have to consider if you want to be competitive, given how accessible technology and tools have become to your competitors. So finding those little efficiencies, with AI across the whole process is going to let you see sustainable growth 9 times out of 10. One example of many of using AI to kind of speed up auditing would be using a tool like MarketMuse. If you're trying to do auditing to understand what topics you're currently covering and, what authority you already have, so you can find some quick wins, you might have prior done like a screaming frog poll, exported all these URLs, and then like manually tagged all the different topics to try to see what topics do we talk about. And that might have taken a very long time, depending on how much content you have. With, a tool like MarketMuse, you can just get it all set up and it can tell you pretty instantly which one or like what topics you have authority on, and you can kind of figure it out from there and find those quick wins hours and hours quicker than kind of doing it prior. So things like that can help you speed up your auditing to help you find those insights so that you can figure out those kinds of inputs for your strategy that much faster. So then looking at strategy, regardless of your goal, regardless of what inputs you acquired through the research you did or the auditing you conducted, you still have to pick somewhere to start. So you're going to have to find ways to balance and consider all these different and new, inputs to pick the real deal opportunities that apply to you specifically, as opposed to those shiny balls that try to apply to everyone poorly. You do that, we recommend, by kind of approaching it with the mindset of lift versus reward to help you kind of sort through everything, and what your lift is and what your reward will be will vary depending on your situation, depending on what you uncovered in your research phase, your auditing phase, but that kind of matrix of low lift, high reward versus, high lift, low reward, will help you kind of sort all the different opportunities that you find to help you figure out what the quick wins are, where can you start, where are you going to see the most benefit for you specifically, which does also mean kind of considering the logistics of what's possible with your organization, given your resources, what experts do you have, what's your budget, someone good at social, do you have designers, developers, analytics support, do you have time to devote to copywriters, do you have people who can be specifically dedicated to SEO, do you need to hire an agency for that? Do you have a lot of content that you already have to work with? Do you have nothing and you need to start from scratch? Are you in a competitive industry? Like all these different things are just kind of logistical inputs into what can be like the material actualization of your strategy, in addition to kind of all the purely strategic stuff. It's like, okay, but down to business, we got to pick something as well. So despite the feeling, it might feel like that, everything is fundamentally changing with AI and all these different things. Hopefully, like throughout the course of this training series, you can start to see that it's not that something is fundamentally actually changing. It's almost as if it's more of an expansion than a change. All of this is really just changing how you can operate steps within the things you already do. It might be changing like the viewpoint you have, or it may force you to kind of expand your definition of the things you do. But, you can continue to more or less do the processes you're used to already. Because at the end of the day, your goal hasn't really changed either. Your goal as content marketers remains, as it always has, to build and claim authority. Your specific SEO goals may be conversions. Your department may be held to leads. Your business is probably, I imagine, looking for revenue. The tools you use to audit, go in and out of fashion. There's new technologies that make life easier and harder. Google has its various algorithm updates, but you're still always trying to show that your business is a trusted source. That's always true. You're still always putting yourself out there to, go on that first date, start building that relationship with your audience. How you go about that may be looking different than it did 5 years ago. Initiatives and priorities may differ at your organization, situation to situation or year over year as things happen, but that's always kind of that underlining goal that you're striving for. So, if you're keeping your priorities aligned to that, underlying goal of just like, I just want to be an authoritative source that people can trust, the rest is kind of puzzle pieces, some trial and error, experimentation, testing to figure out how to get those pieces to fall into place. Elizabeth, you're muted.
Thank you. I should be, but not at this moment. So as you map out your content plans and think about your content priorities, what areas are you focused on? I'm going to launch this new poll. And top, middle, bottom, or all? Where are we at? The quick one. So it's they're coming in fast. About halfway there. Get some more responses in. We have one clear winner and one coming up behind. I'm curious if it'll shift as more people enter the poll. And we'll close it in another 10 seconds or so. And then after this, we're going to head into some examples. All right, I think we got them. So, oh, we got one more in. All right, end poll. So we have about 60% doing everything, all of the above, about 20% top of funnel. Any reactions, thoughts? Surprised, not surprised?
I'm glad all of the above won. Otherwise, it'd be a difficult conversation we'd be having.
Yeah, I love to see it. And definitely, even if you are prioritizing all of the above, it still makes sense that we have it even just within our own marketing department. There's still probably a favorite, even if you're doing all of it, but finding that that balance, if you're being like, okay, if we're doing 10 pieces a month, we'll do 2 of this, 2 of that, 4 of that, or that's only 8, but whatever. And, you can figure out how you want to allocate your resources. But yeah, very excited to see that most of you guys are able to consider the full funnel, because it can be so tempting to just focus on that which drives conversions, but that can be so not long term. So love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, Elizabeth, come on, let's get going. Let's get on with these examples. I'm dying to
It's on
look
to
at
you,
them.
Stephen. Go for it.
All right, so as the title says, different circumstances and goals can inform that content process. It's not a cookie cutter sort of situation. So we're going to go through some actual examples. We're going to see how those differences will impact your content strategy. And the first one that's up here for our very first example, number 1, it's a situation here which some of you may have found yourselves in already. Large inventory of content. That could be both a positive and negative, depending on how you view it, depending on what sort of situation you're walking into. In this case, it was a challenge because the person walking into the situation wasn't really sure what was going on. There was a lot of content there, a lot of different owners in the past had different initiatives. Priorities didn't line up. Worse than that, when you don't have, you've got content supporting a product that's no longer around. What do you do then? So, the overall goal is you want to improve your entire site. You want to make sure that it's telling Google, or that your content is telling Google exactly where you are an expert in. And, maybe there's some gaps. So the whole challenge here is to try to find those gaps. And on the next slide, I'm going to kind of walk you through that process and also just, kind of think about how AI can play that role. So lots of content. How do you figure out whether the stuff is relevant, whether the things are of quality that you wouldn't be embarrassed to show to people anymore? Those are certain challenges. In the past, what we would be doing, like 10 years ago, Screaming Frog, crawl that site, put it into an Excel file and go line by line, look at the content, kind of making a judgment yourself if you thought it was good or not. Maybe make a couple of notes on the side. Very, very tedious process, which is why people hate doing these content inventory and audits, because they're just not fun. And quite frankly, a lot of times they just wouldn't be very helpful, because a lot of those quality assessments would be very subjective. That's the challenge there when you're doing it in that manual mode. With AI, it makes the process quicker, very fast. We can find out what pieces of content are about what, and we can get these quality evaluations that are no longer subjective, they are objective. And so not only can we see what we've got, whether it matches up, but whether or not we actually have to do something about it. Because one of the dangers too with that old content, especially now with Google's helpful content update, it's no longer a separate thing. It's worked in the core algorithm. But that old stuff that actually isn't very good can now drag down your site's performance overall. It still can do that. So even your best content will not be able to perform as good as it could have. And so that's where it's really important now to not just think about new content, but think about all that existing content that you've got on the site. And so, of course, one of the things is once you have that sorted out, then you have to figure out, well, what topics am I going to build authority on? You're going to have to make that prioritization like Andy was talking about earlier on. Unfortunately, I've never met a content team that has unlimited resources and we can just do everything that we want to do. And that's not the way life works. So we do have to figure out what those priorities are. Some of those AI can help us to a certain extent. They can help us, determine our priorities or maybe create a shorter list of things to choose from. And then, of course, we're going to, make sure that these all tie back to important business objectives, because the objective isn't to rank for a certain phrase or keyword. It's actually to drive leads, business, whatever you want to call it, the thing that actually pays dollars so that you can get more in your budget. Because if you're not doing that, then it really makes it hard to make a case. And so one of those other things too is that, you're going to have these situations. And again, 6 years ago, when I first started at MarketMuse, just optimizing individual pages was fine. You could do that and get away with increased search visibility. Now you really have to be thinking a lot farther beyond that, thinking in terms of clusters and figuring out where those gaps are, not just on your page, but within your cluster, and really optimizing those clusters for maximum impact. There's all sorts of ways you can do that. And one of the things that we put down here was, people are using, large language modeling prompts for classifying URLs in the buyer journey, for example, and identifying gaps. That's a pretty simple thing that you can do with ChatGPT. One of the things I advise, though, is that be careful. Try it out on a very, very small subset, because unlike regular programming, where, if you make a mistake, a program will come back and tell you, hey, that's not working. With large language models, they don't do that. They will just give you information that looks really good, even if it's not. So there's just a certain amount of caution that you have to, take into account when you're considering those sorts of things. Otherwise, you can find yourself, going fast in the wrong direction. And that's not what we want you to do. After all, these are just tools, and we got to keep that in mind. Even though the tools are getting smarter, you still need somebody with talent to operate that machine. And let's not forget that. I understand that a lot of people are looking for AI to relieve them of a burden. It can only go so far. You will still need somebody that's a master at the craft to help you out. The danger in not having someone, of that caliber helping you is that you make the mistakes. They make you feel good at the time, and you just find yourself, down the road finding out that, hey, you know what? Pushing out 5,000 blog posts of AI generated content last month, it made me feel good, but now my site's been de-indexed. And those are the sorts of things that we ran into, or not we, but people did run into with the misuse or the abuse of AI, because it makes it easy and it makes you feel good. And that's what we just end up with, is just bad content, which doesn't actually drive any business results. And after all, it all comes back to those business results. Now, we've got actually a couple of more examples, and Annie's going to show you a neat example as well in a different sphere. This one was software. This other one, we're not going to put you to sleep with this, are we, Annie?
No, we will not. Yeah, so for this example, I'm going to tag team it with Lauren here in a minute. We wanted to walk through a situation where it wasn't that we were looking necessarily at existing content. That was certainly a factor of it, but a client came to us with an idea they wanted to prioritize for new topics, but kind of after going through our process here, it ended up being maybe not quite so fruitful of an idea that they thought it would be. So the client of ours is a mid-market retailer specializing in sleep products. They wanted to find a way to increase the blog's influence on revenue, as does everyone, since a portion of what we had up until that point was, it was more about specific opportunities at that point. It wasn't really centered around a strong central theme, or if there was a kind of disparate themes here and there. So they're looking for something a little bit more driven to revenue. They came to us with the idea that they wanted to start writing more topics around sleep health and sleep disorders. On the surface, that kind of made sense. You have a bad back, maybe you read a blog about how, a new mattress can help relieve back pain. If we were going to be going off of kind of gut feeling and even business goals alone, that maybe would have seemed like something potentially worth pursuing. But because we did our due diligence with competitive research and auditing, we kind of confirmed our suspicions that the topic universe of kind of sleep health was just a little too removed from what their business actually was, since they didn't really sell medical equipment or anything like that. They also would have been competing with competitors like Mayo Clinic and WebMD, which the odds of being them are, shall we say, a little low. So after talking with our client too, we confirmed that, while they wanted to write about these topics, they didn't have any sleep health experts or sleep scientists, on staff that would have been able to help us write the content. This then would have created a situation for us where we would have been writing about topics that we have to loosely connect to our actual products without having any topical authority already previously established, kind of in the sleep health area, and without the help of experts to devote to really building the expertise that Google would have wanted to see in such, a competitive and serious, like your money, your life topic. As their agency, then we needed to figure out how we can honor their request to more closely tie blog traffic to revenue by ideating and building authority around content topics that were more directly related to their business and their products, while also being able to, logistically demonstrate expertise based on the resources that we had.
So in terms of how this full process kind of manifested for the client, as Annie mentioned, we had, we're the agency partner, our client is coming to us. We understand that the goal is tying traffic to revenue, but they're really pushing this idea that we should be going after this particular topic category, sleep health, sleep disorders, because there's seemingly large opportunity there. And I think before we even looked at the data, we had a suspicion that that was not going to be the right approach, but it was really important to us as the agency partners being able to tell the right data story to back up our claims. We're not going to just reject their idea, but we're always gonna come with another solution, right? And so part of us telling this data story was really taking the time to do that kind of SERP analysis, understanding what the landscape looked like, particularly related to those queries and keywords around sleep health, sleep disorders, as client had requested, to ensure that there was a justified reasoning for pursuing that path. And obviously what we found from our analysis, as Annie mentioned, confirmed suspicions that, we're not going to beat WebMD or Mayo Clinic when we're talking about spine pain. These are actual reputable medical sources. And so we had no existing topical authority. Even if we attempted to build topical authority, it was never going to be competitive enough to rank anywhere remotely close to some of these top search results. And so even though there was this seemingly very large opportunity from the client's perspective, the data was telling a different story. And so we knew we wouldn't be able to effectively serve that larger goal of tying traffic to revenue if we were pursuing a path that wasn't going to be fruitful in terms of driving traffic. And so once we had the data to be able to effectively rule out that angle, we really needed to focus on, okay, what topics are appropriate for us to discuss? And there were a couple of inputs that we were considering that kind of helped narrow that focus. As we've been discussing, there's, again, so many different opportunities, and especially with this particular retail client, there are so many avenues we could explore in terms of buyer journey of, where we could focus our attention. How are we going to narrow down our selection and our focus? And so first we started by doing an audit where, as Annie mentioned earlier, this was a little bit pre-AI in the terms of how we use it now, but we really manually went through and tagged all of our clients' existing content according to theme and mapped that out against performance and tried to identify if there were any particular categories where we saw strong performance. Off the bat, looked a little bit scattered, but we did see that there were a handful of pieces in these certain buckets of content that seemed to pull through when they made mention of certain things, like, for example, any content that really focused on specific pros and cons of specific features of a mattress or a sleep product, like things like the material, how durable is this, or how long is this going to last, how easy is this to maintain, comparing inner spring to foam, things like that. Anything that was really specific about the benefits of the specifics of the products they were selling obviously did really well. So that gave us some indication of how we could expand our topic clusters, but that was really focused again on that end product. That's more towards that mid-bottom funnel. How are we getting audiences into the fold where we can nurture them to a place where that content is relevant for them? From there, we did some additional audience research. And so we were able to then identify some new customer pain points, kind of key milestones on the buyer journey when they're going through the process of selecting these type of sleep products. We looked at market research. We looked at reviews of our clients' products, of competitor products. We looked at social commentary, all that stuff to try to get the most comprehensive view possible of what audiences were looking for in terms of problems that our clients' products could solve. How are we solving the problems for them? How are we answering those questions? Layering then those insights into what we knew about what content already performed well on our site, where we already had authority. That's really how we got to building out these hubs, or prioritizing our hubs into the 2 or 3 that we wanted to start with, and then being able to present that to our client. And so taking into consideration that existing authority, those audience insights, our client goals, we were able to kind of stack rank which opportunities made the most sense for us to begin with. And so for this particular client, the one kind of topic that really emerged as a primary focus for us, again, was around kind of like mattress care, speaking specifically or building specifically off of content that they had that talked about features like cooling technology and again, like springs versus foam, like making it very clear which end product makes the most sense for whatever their need is. And then layering on that audience research, where through that process, we were able to identify kind of 2 key personas where mattress care and like queries related to durability, longevity, things like that really came into the fold. Those 2 groups that we identified were like young people fresh out of college looking to buy their first mattress or like make that investment, without mom and dad's help. And so they're looking for, how am I getting bang for my buck? This is an investment I want to make one time that's going to last. So I need something that's easy to maintain, that's durable, maybe that has a great warranty, but we're understanding like what kind of product or what should I be looking for to maximize the longevity of this investment that I'm making. And then similarly, we found like parents, for example, who are buying for their children. Kids are messy, they have accidents, like what kind of products are going to withstand some wear and tear so that I don't have to keep making this purchase over and over again. So that really gave us a great place to start building out content that could specifically address these 2 buyer journeys and lead us to a similar point where we're discussing content around, mattresses and other sleep products that are geared towards meeting these goals. But we were able to then expand out into that mid and upper funnel by understanding how these customers were coming to that conclusion. And by being able to thread that needle effectively for our client and tell that data story of, thank you so much for your suggestion, but here is why the opportunity that you presented to us maybe is not the most fruitful for your business, but here's what we did to uncover an opportunity that is going to be beneficial for you. And tying that back to their goal, which ultimately was, how are we connecting traffic to revenue? That made them really excited to get started on content production. So it's really all about doing your due diligence to be able to effectively communicate that narrative for buy-in as well. And one thing I want to note before I pass back to Stephen for our final example is, I had made mention earlier, there were a couple of steps that we ended up doing manually in this specific instance, but where it makes a ton of sense, where if we were going to replicate it today, we would be able to introduce AI. I mean, doing that kind of SERP analysis, being able to kind of streamline, what the competitive landscape looks like for any particular topic and where you stand in comparison to these competitors and what the kind of reach is going to be for you to get to a place where you're actually competitive with them, or if that topic category is maybe not, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. Same thing with, as Annie mentioned earlier, the audience research component. There's a lot of that kind of manual tagging that can be eliminated by utilizing language modeling to evaluate, what are people saying online? What do reviews say? What's kind of customer sentiment, and spitting out a narrative for you about why those people buy. There are so many steps throughout this process that can be made simpler and smoother and more time efficient with the right tools. And so even though it can seem overwhelming that there are so many tasks at hand to be able to get from A to B, we're able to do all of it so much faster with the right tools at the right times. And so that's just something important to keep in mind when you're going through this process for your brands or your clients as well. Stephen, passing it back to you.
Rookie mistake there, was on mute. All right, so last client profile here. Maybe you found yourself in this situation. You got a smaller site. In this case, it was a consumer goods, and it was more of a local SEO play. that part is kind of irrelevant. If you've got a small site, what's going to happen is, you're going to be struggling to build authority. Maybe you think you have authority in space that you actually don't have. And just because your homepage says you're, the best whatever, doesn't really mean you are. You've got to prove it with content. And so the challenge is figuring out what content do you have to create, because you got a small site, you really don't have a lot of existing content to benefit from and to take advantage of. So if we look at the next slide, I'll basically run you through what those challenges are here. And, when you're trying to figure out how much content do I need to create, one of the things is that, do I need to actually create a whole new cluster of content around this specific topic? Because again, it's not one page. I would say for 99% of the cases, anything that's worth pursuing, one page isn't going to be enough to show that you're an expert anymore. Those days are long gone. So, maybe you do have some content. Even if you've got a small site, you'd be surprised. When you bring AI into the picture, we're not doing string matching anymore. We're looking at semantics to find out what those pages are really talking about. Maybe there is an opportunity to connect things. With MarketMuse, and I'll show you a screenshot in a minute, but one of the things is with the personalized difficulty is you can understand exactly what you need to do. So is it a case of, hey, can I just get away with optimizing my page, or can I just get away with maybe optimizing my cluster if I've got one? Or is this the case that I have to create a whole new cluster? If that's the case, again, coming back to this whole thing about priorities and resources, maybe that's not what I want to do. Maybe that's, just going to be something for another day. Maybe I have to take a smaller bite out of the puzzle, out of the pie, right? And focus on something that's more attainable with the resources I have. Especially, with a small site, it's usually a small site because they don't have a lot of content resources. And so you have to be thinking those sorts of terms. And if it is a case of, hey, you know what? I don't care. I need to be recognized as an expert because that's our business. And, that one page I have that says I'm an expert, everybody doesn't really pull any weight anymore. Then it really becomes, well, how many pages do I have to create? And, what quality? And what am I up against with my competition? Because, we're not really creating content in a vacuum. We're creating content and we're always up against other people in search, at least if we're thinking about an SEO content strategy, right? And so that's where we have to start doing that competitive analysis to understand, well, how many pages, does my competitor have around a specific topic? And God forbid, we don't want to, I love Screaming Frog. It's got great uses, but I don't want to have to run Screaming Frog on all the top 20 competitors for every single SERP term I'm thinking of dominating. That would be just too hard. And let alone then trying to figure out which pieces of content match with what topic. So, you can do things like use MarketMuse to do a site level analysis to understand, well, what pieces do they have? How well do they really cover the topic? Are there gaps in their coverage? There might be not just gaps at a page level, but maybe there's site-wide things that your SERP competitors don't talk about. And that can actually then give you the opportunity to differentiate your content, because that's the one mistake that I see a lot of people making when they think about optimizing content. Their perspective is, well, you know what? I only care what the top 20 are doing, and I'm just going to optimize my content so it looks like the top 20. That doesn't make much sense to me, because if you really think this through, like logically, why would Google reward you with improved search positioning just because you did the same thing that the other top 20 results are doing? It has 20 great results already. So that kind of approach isn't going to really help you that much anymore. Of course, you want to make sure that you've got all the basics down, and having a topic model like MarketMuse provides you with is going to help with that. Our topic modeling is a little bit different from most. We go beyond, we look at hundreds of pages that talk about any subject. You give us a subject, we're going to look at hundreds, maybe even thousands of pages on that subject. What are people writing? How are they writing about it? What are the things that they're talking about? And then we map that topic model back to the top 20. That way you can actually find things where there's gaps, maybe even across the entire top 20, right? Top 20 doesn't talk about this, but a lot of other people do. And those are the gaps that you find. Those are those opportunities that you have to differentiate your content, because you don't want people coming to your site, taking a 5-second look going, hey, that just looks like the top 20. And then they're out of there Google doesn't really need much in the way of processing power to understand that you've gone to that page for 5 seconds and you went back to their search engine's results, right? It's a simple calculation for them to figure that one out, that your page isn't meeting the correct intent. And so that's the sort of thing that we'll get, that we can, if we're using AI correctly to help us differentiate our content, as opposed to just making it look like everybody else's content, then we can have great success. But if we don't do that, if the only thing that we're looking to do is just copy people, that's where we end up getting into trouble. Now, I'm actually going to show you too on the next slide. I'm going to show you just a screenshot I took of this specific client. And here's an example where, they want to be known as commercial storm recovery services. That's part of what they do. And here there are a number of different topics that, well, when people talk about commercial storm recovery services, these are the sorts of things that you're going to see across their site. Way more than this. In fact, that our topic universe can cover up to 3,000 or more topics associated with a specific subject. But in this case, this site only had like a handful, like literally just 29 topics, search terms, keywords, whatever you want to call that, associated with this specific subject. And here was the problem too, is that when we look at this, we could say, hey, you know what? We're not performing very well for some of these for some of them, let's just say for all of them, to be quite frank. We're not doing well with them. We have very little in the way of topic authority around these. We can see from that personalized difficulty. And by the way, I'm just going to mention the way we determine that topic authority is that we actually look at a site and we'll look at the breadth and depth of coverage for a specific topic. So we're looking through all of the pages on the site to understand how well you're covering that from both perspectives. And then we assign that, and it can be anywhere from -100 to 100. That's your topic authority. Lots of people talk about topic authority. We're one of the very, very, very few that actually assign values, and it can actually calculate that. Because once you've got that and you understand what that is, it's just a simple matter of taking that and subtracting that from your standard keyword difficulty, which we also calculate. And that's just a generic, backlinks metric. Once you subtract it from that, then you've got your personalized difficulty, which takes into account your content and how well it's covered and how well it performs. And so there we can see, hey, you know what? If we want to become known in commercial storm recovery services, well, there's a few things we got to do. Yes, we have a page that's associated with it. And thank God, it's at least on the first page of the SERPs. But we have our work cut out because it's easy, but it's not that easy. And everything else associated with it, well, we have our work cut out to get ourselves just even on the board. And so this is just a small little snapshot. One of the things you'd want to do is take that same process and apply that to other equally valuable commercial terms, right? So if somebody wants to be known for other things too, and in this case, they did more than just commercial storm recovery services, you'd want to check that out as well and say, hey, you know what? If it's a situation where I have, more authority in another, line of business, then maybe what we want to do is first build that out, especially if those lines of businesses are somewhat related. We can build out that topic authority or take advantage of a greater topic authority on an adjacent line and kind of push out our authority. I think of authority like a big bubble. I'm always trying to push that out and make it bigger and bigger. I can take my authority in an adjacent area and push that out until I finally get into this one, commercial storm recovery services. I know we're running out of time. We got 5 minutes left. We want to leave some for Q&A. So I'm going to shut up.
I wasn't going to tell you to do that, but yes, I'll summarize quickly. Focus on building authority through clusters. Your site tells a story to search engines and to readers. Tell that story thoroughly. Don't just scratch the surface. Show them you know the most about your topic, and show them through building content across the entire funnel, which almost everyone's doing here, which is great. Not just when they're ready to buy. So sales cycles can be long, and research shows buyers don't speak to the vendor sometimes until 80% through their research. Be there in that 80% with your content. All of the content you publish should have a purpose to drive toward a goal. It should contribute to a cluster in the funnel. And keep testing and trying new things as AI overviews and LLMs evolve while maintaining activity around what you know works. High quality, helpful content that shows your expertise. So we do have a few questions, which is interesting with the poll that we had around funnel and what we're covering. So Why focus on top of funnel right now? Is it still worth the investment with how search engines and LLMs are kind of pulling things together? What's the reasoning why you're so excited about why everybody's focusing on the full funnel of content? Who wants to hop in real quick first?
I'll hop in, and I'm just going to give you my 2 Canadian cents worth here. If you're not focused on that full funnel of content, it's really hard to show that you're an expert. And it's really hard. It's going to be even more harder to gain traction. I understand that top of funnel content might not have as much impact as it did in the past traffic wise, but it's still going to be important for building that authority, because if you don't have it, there's going to be like this big hole.
Yeah, one of the phrases that one of our silverbackers had said one time that has always stuck with me. I don't think he came up with it, but a rising tide lifts all ships. And there's a lot of upper funnel that just, it might not be the immediate conversion effect that it has, but it has such like an aura of productivity that can, yes, be difficult to track. And we'll get into that with the measurement session kind of coming down the road here, but it has such an impact in all these other different ways. There's so many different kinds of value that you can get out of content. Yes, there's conversion, but there's also kind of like getting a sign up directing to this page, meeting a user need, hey, they had this pain point. We want to make sure we can address it. Like we can use this in email. We can get this as a white paper. Like there's so many different types of value that you can have. It's just recognizing that upper funnel might just have a different type of value than it did before, which is kind of exciting because then you get to have different types of value at different stages in the funnel. So then everything you're doing, it all kind of just fits in together. Like, I don't know. Maybe not Jenga because that falls over, but for lack of a better analogy, it's all fits together. Builds a tower.
Awesome. Love it. One other question. We talked a little bit about prioritization and using data to influence decisions and direction. This came up a little bit in your example, Lauren and Annie, but there's a lot in this question, and we see this a lot with our clients too, there's pressure to focus on certain areas or pressures from various teams to write content about this, and this, which can take you away from that overall goal and direction that you put that research into and in place. So do you have any recommendations for someone in that position?
I'd say tune in to next week or next month. I think something that we're going to discuss in a lot more detail in our measurement session is, not just measurement from the perspective of like, what metrics should you look at, but really more so how we're adequately reporting up and telling that story and telling that narrative effectively. And as we discussed in our example, like threading that needle. I think part of the difficulty, and it's always been this way for content, is having that direct connection when it comes to like, what is like the exact dollar amount that content drove. We've always had a difficulty with that sort of attribution. And I think even more so now with the added pressure of like proving the value of especially like upper and mid funnel content, I think having the right reporting structure in place, making sure that you're tracking the right metrics, and then that you're communicating that in a way that is tailored to whatever leadership or stakeholder you're beholden to, and making sure that you're always closing that loop back to the goal in a really clear and concise way is going to be really important. So I think we'll have some more tangible examples to walk through in our next session. But when it comes to making sure that we're proving out the alignment between our strategies and our business objectives, the format of that report is going to be really important.
Yeah. I think the main thing is like if they're coming to you like with a specific topic that they want to talk about, for example, and you've come to your conclusions that that's maybe not going to be it. I think it's just asking the question like, why do you think that's a good topic? Like genuinely, like why do you think that's what we should pursue? Like what is the driving force behind that? Like what are you trying to accomplish with this? And as long as you can still accomplish what they were originally trying to accomplish, just in a different way, it's a little easier to get them on board usually.
And you know what? Part of content strategy is just learning to say no.
Just say no. No, I appreciate it, guys. And yeah, we'll be talking more about measurement and communicating up in the next session. You'll receive a copy of this recording in the next day or two, along with the cheat sheet, a little preview there of how to execute some of these strategies. Tune back in on June 26th at 1 p.m. We'll talk about measurement and communicating that content impact to your team.